Suffering is not only normal, but it's also purposeful in the Christian life. What in the world could suffering accomplish in our lives? Where in the world would God use suffering in our lives? There are many reasons the Bible says that God uses suffering in our lives. Let me give you a few of them. The Bible teaches that suffering shows us truth that we can never learn otherwise. Suffering teaches us truth that we can never learn otherwise. Just read the book of Psalms. And how many times the psalmist says, I did not know this about the Lord until I faced the furnace of affliction. And it's in the furnace of affliction that we learn deeper truths about God, deeper communion with God, deeper fellowship with God, deeper dependence upon God, deeper reliance upon God, deeper awareness that we can't do it on our own. Have any of you come to a deeper awareness this year of your need for Jesus? Oh, I sure have. And perhaps that's one of the great realities and great blessings that Jesus is doing in our lives during this year, is leading us to a deeper reliance on Him. Suffering not only teaches us things that we can never learn otherwise, but suffering causes us to trust in the Lord with all of our hearts. Suffering causes us to trust in the Lord with all of our hearts. And when do you learn to trust in the Lord with all of your heart? When do you learn to rest on the Lord? It's not in good times. It's when all around my soul gives way. He then is all my hope and stay. On Christ the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. It's when your soul is about to give way that you recognize that Jesus is the only solid rock that you can stand on. And so He causes you to trust in Him with all of your heart. Suffering draws you and conforms you to Christ. Suffering draws you to the presence of Jesus, deeper to the one who suffered for you. Listen, Jesus wore a crown of thorns, so we should not always expect to wear a crown of roses. There's times in our lives when Jesus takes us down the road of suffering, where we come closer to Him. Suffering destroys sin. When we suffer, when we endure the temptation, when we endure the trial, when we're leaning more into Christ, when we're leaning more into prayer, when we're leaning more into the Word, when we're longing more for the kingdom to come, one of the realities, it causes us to long and think and dwell and desire another world. And the things of this world grow strangely dim, and they lose their flavor, they lose their lure, because we are seeking a deeper grace, a deeper reality, a deeper satisfaction that we realize that this sin-sick world cannot satisfy. And we realize deeper and deeper and deeper during this season that we indeed, you indeed, were made for another world. Anybody feel like an exile here? Anybody feel like, my goodness, this world's not my home? I feel like an alien here. I feel like I was made for another place. And it's not a different era of any country in the past, or the United States in the 50s, or the United States in the 80s, or whatever era, or maybe whatever country you think of. Your longing is not for an era past. Your longing should be for an era future. When the King of Kings and Lord of Lords comes and sets up His rule in this world. That's our longing and our hope. He sets us free from sin. He destroys sin in our lives. Suffering loosens our hearts from this world. Suffering opens up the way of comfort in our lives. I think there's times in our lives when we don't really appreciate comfort until we've gone through times of suffering, and then when God gives us the Comforter, when the Comforter comes and comforts our souls. Then in contrast with the time of suffering is when we delight in His comfort.